Good morning. This is a recap of yesterday's debut playtest of Dark Age of Man. This is a collaborative game design between Del Branham and myself. We are using my world setting from my old D12 game, which is based on a medieval Dark Ages England, which is referred to as England. It is human centric. There are no demi-human races, etc. There are some supernatural uh, characters. Cannot be magic-based heroes. They are all human beings. However, our system also uses my prestige system that I've been working on with both D12 and another OSR game. We are using point buy for very simple character build. You do not score experience points. You score a repute point based on the GM's discretion or some total of play, and that one single repute point can actually buy an attribute point. Characters can start anywhere from 0 to 3 repute points, depends on the nature of the campaign or the session in which the GM wants characters to be, and they can max out at a total of 10 points or 10 repute. The prestige system at the start determines where you sit in a feudalistic society. 0 would be a peasant, a 1 would be a professional, a 2 would be a merchant, gentry, 3 would be a knight, or excuse me, I can't remember exactly. But anyway, the point is, whatever your prestige is, it places you in the society. That can be improved. That's one of your attributes. And that prestige is used overwhelmingly in your social conversations, in all kinds of different ways. Prestige can influence a scene between the human beings, kings, and bishops, and lay people, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, bandits, whatever the case may be. So that's pretty much, it gives you an idea. We use what's called the naive narrator, something that I have been developing along with Dell, and we have worked on this with other game systems. And the naive narrator refers to players are always a naive narrator. They don't know anything. They just act or declare actions and take actions. The GM is always omniscient, and this system puts both in naive chair. The GM is still in control of the truth and the details, but you don't prepare anything. The only thing that's prepared, the players know as much about the world and setting as the GM does, so they'll know the location they started, which is called Dredgewater. They will know all the NPCs that exist in Dredgewater. They will know some about the local map, and they might even know a couple of the other local villages and counties. Same thing the GM knows, exactly the same thing. And then the players will roll a random seed. This seed chart is weighted. The extremes on the curve could be world changers. In the middle are more pedestrian types of things that can come up that are presented in play organically as the players explore the world, right? Okay. There can also be random encounter charts, which occurred yesterday as well. So we call our game master a director. This is meant to be kind of put in a movie style attitude. I mean, you don't actually use film terms, and you don't actually use photograph terms, etc. But maybe scene act style if you want to, right? Because it's naive narrator, you can't know what the start of an act is and the end of an act is, but it could be presented in such a way. But we have the actual game master is called the director, and the actual characters are called protagonists. And yes, this is a be a fan of the characters style of gaming. The mechanism is designed to be used in play, prompted by in-character narration that would then require the GM to demand a challenge or a roll. The roll should be all rolls are made by the player, and they are made against what's called a contest value. That contest value is a difficulty number. If they succeed, the GM goes on to narrate, the director goes on to narrate the result in a positive way, or the character could narrate it depending on the nature of the scene. and vice versa. If it's a failure, we get that information from the director. Okay. The CV works for every single thing. CVs work for monsters in combat. CVs work for bartering with the blacksmith. CVs work for disabling the trap in the mine. CVs work for deciphering the runes on the statue. Just think of a CV as a difficulty rating or a challenge rating or a target number. But everything in the game is based on a CV. So the character matches their attribute to the appropriate, the CV challenge to the appropriate attribute. They make the single die roll, and that is the probabilities of success on that roll are affected by the discrepancy between the player's attribute and the CV value. So facing a dragon, for instance, might be a CV of 15. The player might only be a 4 combat. That's a negative 11. For the most part, they could only hurt the dragon on a critical success roll, right? If they would want to not be in a combat with a dragon, duh, right? You don't want your low level human being in armor with a shield and a mace fighting a dragon, right? So there you have it. But it gives you an idea how the system works. So this was our very first play test. Dell and I, this is Dell's dice system. He developed this a long time ago in a play-by-post. He used it in a play-by-post, and I scrapped my dice system and rules to go with his single die roll system. But together we talked out how we wanted to develop. We wanted to make characters and create characters and use characters. And so together we worked out our character attributes. We worked out whether it's a point buy or not, etc., etc. And that's how we got with our characters. I've, of course, pushed my Dredgewater and Ungolin stuff into the document. We have the narrator stuff built with an example of a random seed generator. And I've made the economy system based on prestige and purse. We have a purse rating. That purse rating is basically your wealth, your value as a person. Coupled with actual silver coin. Silver coin is super rare, and it makes you pretty rich to have a silver coin. And coppers are the daily currency. Most peasants earn about 15 to 20 coppers a year. One silver piece is worth 50 copper. The average nobleman earns maybe 1 to 5 coppers a year, depending on the size of their land, their rents, their sources of income. So you can see, like a suit of armor, plate mail armor might be 5 silvers. That's almost a year or 2 years, 3 years wages for the average bloke. Okay, so we do have an economic system. You barter with coin with every shopkeeper, or you never just walk in and shop. This isn't Walmart where prices are set. There is a CV value for either the shopkeeper that you have to barter with, or there is a CV value of the actual item that you have to win. So you still have to roll either a purse rating or a prestige rating via role play, and to acquire the item, the thing, or to have it crafted for you, etc. So you never just get to go buy gear. You have to get everything. So if you're out of torches and you wander into the local general store to small fort, they may not have it. So the role is not only to see can you get it. It may literally represent in failure. They just don't have them. They just don't have any torches. So it's an abstract concept. But what it does is it removes this idea of going shopping and creates an environment that's alive. You're in the world. You have to actually go visit the blacksmith. You're going to have to actually talk to the blacksmith about the kind of sword you want. The blacksmith, and you will negotiate and barter and argue. And the failure could be that you've upset the blacksmith. The failure could be that you just don't have enough value. Or the failure could be that he doesn't have the resources to build you that kind of weapon. So the failure can be any kind of narrative reflection on that barter, right? Okay, traveling is narrative, and it is left to the discretion of the director. It is left to the discretion of the seeds that are rolled. It is left to when these random encounters might occur. But travel is narrative. It can lengthen time, it can truncate time, it can fast forward time, it can drag time. It's affected by terrain and weather and being lost. They will always make a travel roll for the day. That travel roll is really a camping roll. And that camping roll, again, failure means it could be an encounter with a beast. It could be you don't get any sleep because it's miserable weather. It could be that you can't forage or hunt and you're not able to eat. Again, failure can represent anything that narratively makes sense that the director would put in front of the player. And success, of course, can be oh, you found, or you got a rabbit and you found this perfect spot by a pond that's calm and quiet. You sleep like a baby, no noise, nothing comes in the night. So you'll make like a travel roll for every night that you actually are away from civilization. So that's that, right? Pretty simple. Okay, so let's start. We wanted to do this. You can see this actual plan on the channel here. Um, we wanted to create a character of repute 3, which is what we recommend in the book, that all characters start at level 3, or repute of 3, which means they get 3 points to put in one of their 4 attributes. They can max out 3 in one, or they can put 1 in 3, or 2 in one, and 1 in another, etc. Dell chose to put 1 in body, 1 in mind, and 1 in prestige. And he decided, because of his 1 prestige, he's technically what's called a professional. Professionals during this period wouldn't have been much higher than a peasant. People who worked for a living were frowned upon. So doctors, lawyers, etc. Well, he wanted to be, he's a sellsword. So he made himself a mercenary sellsword. He's a professional, but he sells his sword. He's a mercenary. Perfect. He is passing through, right? He's not from Dredgewater. Remember, every session with new characters starts in Dredgewater. Okay, all right? So he rolled his random seed. The random seed he rolled was the local blacksmith needed something to be picked up in Hanso. He happened to choose right out of the gate to go to that blacksmith. In talking to that blacksmith, the blacksmith asked him, "Would you go to Hanso and bring back some iron ore and nails for me that are waiting for me? I can't go, and I'll pay you 15 copper." He was able to negotiate a good quality shield from this, so he was able to swap his bad shield for a new shield, and he was able to make a deal that he would make 15 copper if he would go get this from about a 2 days journey. He decides he wants to stay at the local inn and leave in the morning. In the inn, he ran into my first seed. I rolled a 11, and that 11 is a stranger. That's it. I mean, remember, all of our seeds are incomplete thoughts. They're incomplete sentences. They're meant to make the director think, what is a stranger doing here, and who is this stranger? At the same time, the players are going to meet this stranger in some way. I happen to decide to make this stranger the prince of Fledgling County, and I do have Fledgling Town and Fledgling County on my map. I do have Hansor on my map, and so I decided I'm going to make him the prince and the heir of Fledge County and the king of Fledge County and Fledgling Town. And he's the prince. But why is he here? Well, because his uncle killed his father, the king, and threatened to kill him and his sister, and they escaped with their lives from Fledgling Town. And now he's here with his sister, and he's looking to hire mercenaries so he can go kill his uncle and become the rightful king of Fledgling Town, right? It's very simple. I thought this up literally. I rolled that just shortly before Dell and I started. So I knew I had a stranger, and I had time to kind of formulate, well, who is this guy? So he ends up meeting this guy. The guy is, I told him, he stinks of alcohol. He's clearly been up carousing. And so Dell immediately decides this guy's full of, he's a liar. He is not a prince. He is not kingly. He's only 20-something years old. He declines the offer. That he offers to pay him coin if he'll help him, and if he becomes king, he might even knight him and give him land. And Dell's character's like, yeah, right, whatever, go away. So Dell makes a choice here to not embrace him. He goes up to bed, and this guy sets off to go hire some mercenaries in the day. This is midday. Dell's character goes upstairs, and he meets Prince Alfred's sister, Jezebel. And Jezebel is a princess, and she's 12. And he meets her in the hall. He meets her at her door, and from her demeanor and her appearance and her attitude and how she carries herself, he immediately realizes he might have been mistaken about Prince Alfred. This girl definitely appears royal. She appears to be a princess. So he apologizes to her for what he may have thought of her brother, but good night and good luck. I hope your brother succeeds. He goes to bed. At 2 a.m, his brother has come back. Her brother has come back. He has banged her awake. Dell's character gets up to witness this. He says to him, I have found 6 men who are going to help me, and we are headed back to Fledgling Town. And Dell says, you don't want to take your sister back. That's dangerous. Don't take her with you. You really can't drag your sister back where you were. She was already going to be murdered along with you, and now you're going to drag her in the middle of the night through the world, through the country, and you're going to take her with you with these 6 unknown mercenaries. you're endangering your sister's life. And so he makes a deal with the prince. The prince says, are you basically saying you'll watch her? She'll become your ward while I'm gone. And Dale reluctantly does. He says, fine, I'll take care of your sister while you're gone. So he is now the guardian of this 12-year-old princess. He says, in 2 days, if I don't come back here and find you two, in 2 days, come to Fledgling Town and you will find me on the throne. But give me 2 days with these men to get the job done. And so he shrugs and says, yeah, whatever, good luck. Meanwhile, he puts the girl back to bed. They go back to sleep. And in the morning, he goes down and talks to the proprietor of Blackleaf Inn, Jules. And he says, listen, lady, I'm going to pay you 5 coppers to keep an eye on this girl. I have to go to Hansor for Dar, the blacksmith here. And here's 5 coppers to take care of her for 5 days. I should be gone only 2, but I'll let you keep the coppers. But you take care of her. You keep her out of trouble. And she agrees. Again, these are CV checks. Some of them require checks, some don't. Well, these are rolls to see if she accepts, etc. So he gives up another 5 copper, right, to her to watch the girl. He then heads out for Hansor. He again, Dredgewater literally is on the is 100 yards from River Dredge, and Dredge is floods. And this Dredgewater is in a below sea level bog and swamp. It is forever flooded. It is forever muddy and grotesque. All of the buildings are on stilts. All the walkways and platforms are off the ground on stilts. And therefore, this thing floods all the time. And it's a mess, and it's poor, and it's wretched, and it's tiny. And there's the Golden Leaf Inn, which literally straddles and sets some of its stilts set in the river. It's a beautiful, large inn and tavern that overlooks the river, and it's the higher income kind of place in town. Blackleaf Inn is right smack in the middle of town with the church and the blacksmith and the sheriff's stockades. Okay. Anyway, so he goes over to the ferry, and he pays the ferryman to take him across the river. This old man takes 30 minutes to get across this river. As he's disembarking, he makes a prestige check on 3 soldiers who have tabards, and he recognizes that these soldiers belong to a king in London town, and they are anywhere from 7 to 10 days from home, and they're not knights, they're soldiers. What are they doing here? He nods to them. They get back. They get on the ferry. They smack the little man around. They don't pay him for travel, and they go across. And he makes a note of this. These guys are dishonorable soldiers of this king that is on the far side of England, on the River Thames, right? So then he heads off on his adventure, and he hikes through the woods. He knows he's got another day and a half hike to get to Hansor. Midday, again, this is a random encounter roll. He stumbles across a knight, and he ends up face-to-face with this knight who tells him you must pay a toll. He then challenges the knight, what kind of dishonorable act is it to make people pay a toll? And the knight explains to him that he is responsible for keeping the riffraff out of this county, and that if to him a sellsword, an empty purse sellsword is no more than a bandit, and the difference between having coppers and not having coppers will make a man a bandit. And he basically says, if you can pay the toll, then I know you're not an indigent, you're not a vagrant, you're not a bandit, potential threat to our county. But Dell doesn't buy it. Dell's like, how dare you, forget it. So he makes a prestige check. He cannot recognize who the man is, but he knows he's a legitimate knight. This guy's decked out in good gear. He talks that way, etc. And in that success roll, he fails to identify who he is, but he does make another check and succeeds at avoiding a lethal confrontation with a knight. The knight literally, so because he won the conversation, but the knight isn't about to just step aside for this no-name mercenary, the knight chooses to fight him in non-lethal pugilistic boxing match, bare-fisted fight. So the knight strips off his helmet and his gloves and puts his sword in the ground, and he challenges Dell's character to a fist fight, and they have this great little fist fight that Dell's character wins. He actually knocks the knight out or down, beat up, but nonetheless leaving the knight unconscious in the turf. He continues on toward Hansor. He sets up a camp when night falls, and he fells. Not only does he fell the roll, but he hits what we call a critical error. So there's critical successes and there's critical errors, and he rolled a critical error, and so that meant that I then described that he set camp, unfortunately, unwittingly, at the base of a cave, at the mouth of a little cave. And in that little cave is a bobcat. And that little bobcat came out as he started to cook dinner and his character had to then run away with his blanket and leave the food for the bobcat, but he survived unscathed. And unfortunately, because of this, he ended up sleeping on the road on the cold ground with his blanket, and he wakes up in the morning wet and dew covered and freezing, and he's really didn't get any rest. So this was a critical failure when it came to his travel night. The next day, he asked some questions of passing by peasants and farm workers about Hansor, and their guests keep going straight ahead. As he gets closer, he says, "Where's the smithy?" They say, "You can't miss it. It's a small town, and the smithy's a large smithy." And so he goes in, and he sees two young teenage men, 16 and 18, pounding away on anvils, and another large man standing in the back. He strikes up a conversation with this man, says, "I'm here to pick up some items for Dar, the blacksmith of Dredgewater." And they end up having a laugh at his expenses. He says, "What's wrong with your face? Who beat you up?" And they have a laugh that he ended up in a fisticuffs with Sir Georgie is his name, and they all laugh. Sir Georgie's a real knight. He's a good man, but he's a little weird, and he thinks he's the police of the whole county kind of thing. Anyway, and they have a laugh at their expense, and then he proves that he is there on behalf of Dar with a leather punched marking. That's the signature of that blacksmith. And so he decides, okay, I'll give you this iron ore and these nails. Well, it's a giant barrel it's probably 80 pounds. And so Dell says, "How the hell am I supposed to carry that back?" And I said, "Well, you should have thought about that." So then he decides he needs a cart. So he starts looking around. He goes down to the groom and he finds an 11-year-old boy that's grooming a horse, and he makes a deal with the boy. The boy says, I can with my mule and my cart, I can deliver you and the thing to Dredgewater for some pay, and my father will let me go with you." And he decides to pay the boy 5 coppers. So now he's paid a ferryman a copper. He's paid 5 coppers to the bar wench. He's paid another 5 coppers to this boy. So he's already spent 11 of the 15 coppers that he's going to make on this deal. So he's literally at right now 4 copper profit margin on this deal if it goes okay. Very funny. So they load this cart up and they take off and they travel farther. They come to the spot where he had fought the knight. The knight is gone. He's obviously packed up his horse and his tent and everything and left. And they continue down and he rolls for the camping for the day, and he rolls this time a critical success. And so I made the critical success a bundle of goods down by the river that's a benefit. It's a treasure. The boy comes up from the river and says, "Listen, I'm fishing. I got some fish. Look." So again, critical success. So I gave them fish. And the boy comes up from the river and says, "There's a bundle on the other side of the river, but I think it's a dead body." And so he says, "Stay here, watch our stuff. I'll go check." So he goes down to the river. It's shallow. It's ankle deep. He crosses the river, pokes at it with his brand new. Oh, by the way, in Hansor, he negotiated with that blacksmith for an excellent grade sword. So he gave up his poor mace for an excellent grade sword. So he now has a good shield and he has an excellent grade sword, and these improve his combat rating. Okay. So he has this wonderful, excellent grade sword. Okay. Anyway, and he pokes the blanket up off this bundle with his excellent grade sword, and under it is a backpack and some items. And in it he finds common clothes of high quality, which would give him, if he wore these around in a city, would give him a prestige bump as gear. It also had 12 copper in it, so he's made 12 copper here finding this. It has a lavender scented scarf that clearly had belonged to a woman. The clothes are for men, and he's got another wool blanket, and he's got a backpack. So he's got this extra backpack, wool blanket. So he's got all this extra stuff. He drags it up to the boy, and they celebrate. They enjoy a wonderful night's sleep. They eat well, and they found this package. So that's what they get from having a critical success camping. The next day, they travel uneventful travel to the ferry. They get on the ferry, and Dell's character says to the ferryman, "Did those soldiers pay you yesterday? I saw what they did to you." And he said, "No." So Dell gives him 4 coppers. He said, "Well, here, I'll pay you for today, and I'll pay you for their travel. Those 3 men plus me, that's 4. And the old man's thrilled. "Thank you so much." And Dell's character has spent 15 of the 15 he's going to earn, but he's found 12. So ironically, that he is now 5 minutes from delivering this package, and he's spent as much as he's earned. So it was unbelievable. The old man convinces the boy to do the crank on the ferry, so the old man doesn't have to crank him across. And the boy, enthusiastic, fast, and healthy and young, gets him across in 17 minutes. The old man got Dell across the day before in about 30 minutes. This boy gets them across in half the time. They unload, and their cart sinks up to its axles in the mud of Dredgewater's center of village, and they have to unload. Dell's character, Emir, goes over and talks to the blacksmith, says, I've delivered your package. You didn't tell me I'd have to pay a fare. You didn't tell me I have to rent a cart. I mean, come on, this was not cool. And the blacksmith said, well, you should have thought of those things, but here, I'll go ahead and give you 20 coppers. So he gives him 20 coppers. So he's made 5, plus he found 12. He's made 17 coppers on this 2-day journey. Meanwhile, the little boy is talking to the princess on the deck of the Blackleaf Inn, and Dell's character calls him down and says, "You need to head home. You need to get back on the road and get home to your father." And the little boy is enamored with the 12-year-old princess. You've got beautiful little girls that live here in Dredgewater, and that's the end of their relationship. The boy takes the cart, and I tell Dell as he drives away, he sees them get on the ferry, and they're starting to cross the river. Meanwhile, Dell says to the princess, go grab your things in the room. We're headed out right now for Fledge, County of Fledge and Fledgetown. We're going to go see if your brother is indeed on the throne. So go get your stuff. While he's standing there waiting for the girl to get her stuff, he realizes suddenly that the water's rising. It's at his ankles, then it's at his shins, then it's at his knees, then it's at his waist, and he hears screaming. He's seeing boats floating. He's seeing huts tear loose. He's hearing trees crash. He looks over at the river, and he sees the ferry's gone, and the river is flooding. I had rolled for the second seed. I rolled a 2, and on our chart, weighted, the extremes of the chart are world-changing events. Well, I happen to roll Dredgewater flood. This means a catastrophic event, and this catastrophic event wiped Dredgewater off the map. Dell's character, seeing the blacksmith swimming in this flood out of his toward the Blackwater Inn, he grabs the girl. They race upstairs with everybody in the inn, including the proprietor. The proprietor takes him to the second floor, to the end of the hall, to a ladder that takes them on the roof. Once they're on the roof, they watch in horror as the Golden Leaf Inn is ripped down into the river. They watch as all the little huts and buildings and fishermen are swept away. They watch as the blacksmith's place of business is totally succumbs underwater. And meanwhile, he has to make a roll as the Blackleaf Inn starts to collapse and break loose and float away. He has to make a roll to hold on to the girl, and he fails. And I believe he rolled a critical failure. And on that cue, I collapsed the entire building into the water. He then had to hold on to a piece of roof and the girl. He had to make a couple of rolls to hold on to her while they tumbled. They both suffered wounds. And at one point, he failed a tumble roll in this flood. And I said to him, you can choose to lose your sword, your shield, or the girl. And he said, well, I'm not going to choose. I'm going to make a random roll. So he actually rolled randomly, see what he dropped. Well, guess what? He lost his excellent sword in the flood. They float for another hour, 2 hours, as this flood it's biblical. It's catastrophic. Dredgewater and all the surrounding hamlets and farms, etc., just hammered, wiped. They float for another hour or so, and he's able to tell from his, he makes a roll to check if he can tell how far and where. He knows they floated about 5 to 6 miles northeast of Dredgewater, a long way, and it's dark. And about 6 in the evening, 10 in the evening, they finally hit a lump of high ground. It's just a mound of mud. They climb off the roof. They climb to the top of this mud-slicked bald hill, and he makes a fire, warms the blankets, dries the stuff, puts the girl to sleep, puts the girl to bed, and he wakes up and he makes a travel. This is one of our travel rolls. He made a positive travel roll. I think he might have had it wasn't a critical success, but it was a success. And I said, there are now fishermen out in boats with lanterns looking for survivors, and one hits this muddy mound and says, come on, get in the boat. I'll take you to Fledgling. I'll take you to Fledgling town. And he's like, that's perfect. And so he grabs the girl up, they grab up all the gear, they throw it in. And this guy rows for another couple hours east until as the floodwaters are receding, at the same time the ground is raising, they beach. And they decide to now start. And this is now, at this point, it's about 12 midnight. In the dark, the girl's cold, she's freezing, she's tired, she's hungry, she's complaining. Dell's character makes a spirit check and boosts her morale, so she shuts up and she behaves. The old man is trying desperately to drag what's left. His only possession left in the whole world is this rowboat, and he's trying to drag it in the mud and the muck to Fledgling Town. After about 45 minutes of this, the old man collapses in the mud, and he's crying as he's lost everything. He may have even lost family, and he realizes that he cannot drag his only possession in the whole world all the way to Fledgling Town. And Dell's character walks up and says, here's 5 copper. Come with us to Fledgling Town. Rebuild your life. And the old man says, what is your name? And Dell says as Amir, just take the 5 copper. Come rebuild your life. He doesn't tell him who he is. And I admit, when I said that to him, I said, if he tells him my name is Amir, he will earn a repute point instantly. And that repute point is incredibly weighty because it lets him upgrade his character. 1 repute equals 1 attribute point. So he could have improved one of his attributes instantly. But because he did not tell him who he was, this old man will tell stories of this compassionate mercenary, but he won't be able to sing the praises of Amir. So he lost a chance to score a repute there. But again, as Dell said, I'm in character. I'm not thinking about winning, and I'm not thinking about scoring points, and I'm not thinking about the game system. And that's what I want to hear. I mean, as players, we want to be engaged. We want to be immersed in this fiction. It's brilliant. They finally hike on. They get to the palisade of Fledgling Town. It is shut down. They pass plenty of refugees and campers. There's fires, and there's camps, there's lanterns, and there's all of these people who have been flooded. These are the survivors who have escaped, and they're all camped out at the gate of the palisade waiting for it to open in the morning. Dell attempts in their state of injury and mud-ridden and caked. I said, she's got branches and stuff in her hair. I mean, you guys look like refugees. And he approaches the gate tower and says to the guard, let us in. And the guard says, are you part of these refugees? And he says, of course not, man. And he fails the roll. He fails miserably. Matter of fact, it's a critical failure. When he made that critical failure in negotiating, that's when I decided the fate of Prince Alfred, the rightful king of Fledgling Town. That critical failure meant he had failed at his mission to kill his uncle and become the king, and that he was going to be hung this day. And the guard said, go away, you got to wait until the gates open in the morning like everybody else. And he pitches his urine over the top, and on top, insult to injury. Now, again, Dell doesn't know that critical failure has decided the fate of the prince, but he also gets a bucket of urine drenched on both of them. So they sleep in the mud out here with the refugees. The next morning they go in. Dell's character immediately takes her to the first inn. He pays the bar wench to take the girl to their room and give her a bath, feed her, and put her to bed. He goes to the community baths and he bathes and cleans himself up. And then he goes to the tavern. And in the tavern, he overhears 2 young laborers in this very busy tavern eating. He overhears them talking about the fool Prince Alfred was caught, and he will be hung today at noon. And immediately, Amir, Dell's character, jumps to his feet and says, I gotta go see if this is true. I gotta go find out what's going on. So he goes outside in this town. He fights through the crowds, and he asks questions. Where are they going to hang the man today? Where are they going to hang the man today? And so he races through town, and he comes to where they're building the gallows, the temporary gallows. There's about 6 laborers out hammering and banging. They're building the gallows. He looks about. Where would they keep him? And to his right, he sees 6 stocks. And there are 4 men in the stocks, and on the far end, closest to him, on the closest end to him, is hanging in the stocks Prince Alfred. And he goes over to Prince Alfred, and he says, my God, man, you failed. What the hell? And when he gets to him, he sees he's been beaten badly. They've whipped him with a cat of 9 tails until he's almost dead. His left eye is so badly damaged that he would be blind. His jaw is broken. And I explained that he's dying. And matter of fact, if they don't hang him soon, they're going to be hanging a dead man. And he says to him, you fool, what have you done? And all the man can muster is, where's my sister? And he says, don't worry, she's with me. I've got her safe. And he says, basically on his dying breath, he tells him, take care of her, please. Get her out of here. Her life's in danger. And the last thing Dell says to him is, well, does she have other family? Where can I take her? And he says, I was her only family. And then he passes out or dies. Dell then says, I've got to go talk to her. She can't hear about this from somebody else. So he goes racing back to the inn, back up to the room, brings it in, dismisses the barmaid, wakes her up, and sits her and says, listen, I'm going to tell you this. You don't want to hear this somewhere else. I'm going to tell you right now. your brother failed, and they're gonna hang him they're gonna hang him. And I said, well, you've got to make a roll because she screams and starts crying, and she jumps up to go run away. And you're gonna have to make a roll. If you fail this roll, she's gonna get out of the room. She's gonna get down to the inn. She's gonna get into the city, running, crying, screaming. If you succeed, you can grab her and stop her. Well, he failed. So he spends time chasing her through the streets, and he sees her in her head screaming to people, "Where are they hanging the man?" And crying and screaming. And when people point and laugh, she runs that way. And as she arrives at the finished gallows, she can see the noose hanging, and she falls to her knees, screaming and crying, "Alfred, Alfred." She looks over to the right. She sees Alfred hanging it, and she crawls on her hands and knees, crying and screaming in the mud. The gathering crowds, as I described this to Dell as he's chasing her, as the gathering crowds to see him hung realize that she cares for him, realize that she is weeping on his behalf, they start kicking the girl and pushing her into the mud, throwing potatoes at her and mud at her and tomatoes at her, and they're pushing her and kicking her into the mud when they realize that she cares for this king killer. And Dell grabs her up in this crowd, fights through the crowd, picks her up, throws her over his shoulder, and he fights back through the crowd, and he takes her away from this mob that probably would have, if not killed her, it would have led to her being discovered, and she would have probably been killed ultimately. But he rescues her again, and it runs through the streets and through the palisade doors as that ends our session, fade to black. This was a remarkable playtest. Number one, the system works, the math worked, the implementation of the system worked, the ability to be in-character role play for both of us. The naive narrator we already know works. With this random seed generator we already know works. We've been doing this for 6 or 8 sessions already with another game system. The currency and purse system worked. The prestige system worked great. Everything really worked. A one-on-one game is a lot easy to test. It's very easy to test because we only have to worry about one player character or protagonist in our game. So anyway, that's the session, and it was fantastic. And here's the thing that was amazing about it. Dell's character technically rescued this princess 3 times. He rescued her from the bad judgment of Alfred, who was going to drag her back to kill the king. He then rescued her from the flood, and then he rescued her from the mob. The reality is this is a remarkable little adventure. If we continue with these characters and continue playtesting in this campaign world, a couple of things are true. One, Dredgewater is gone. All those NPCs and everything that existed about Dredgewater are gone, right? Those NPCs may be alive, but they're somewhere else. But Dredgewater, for the most part, is gone. It's destroyed. The little boy and the mule, the cart, and the ferryman, gone, swept away on the river. So the relationship he'd built with the little boy, and everything, all from a random seed catastrophe roll, basically. But here's what's important. He technically is the guardian of this 12-year-old rightful queen of Fledge County, Fledgling Town. Pretty cool. So in a way, he's got this 12-year-old princess, should be queen, and he's and she's his ward on behalf of Prince Alfred. So it'll be fast. It would be fascinating if we continue to play. What is this character going to do with this 12-year-old queen, this 12-year-old princess that should be queen? Pretty fascinating how that all comes out of totally random seeds, and his character's decisions as to what's important and what he wants to pursue and who he wants to talk to and what he wants to pay attention to. That's what gives us our adventure, not some railroad, not some story, not some preparation. If I had prepared a story with a prince and a princess, and he was supposed to help them in some way, it would have it doesn't work, right? It would be railroading. It would be hoping, crossing your fingers that Dell's character is remotely interested in these people, right? But it doesn't matter if he is or not, because I can shrug and say, well, we roll what's next on the chart. It doesn't make any difference whether he engages here. He could have said, whatever, man, and ignored the girl. He could have never met the girl. If he had knocked on the door, he would not have met the girl. And he would have gone on to Hansor and did other things, and we would have rolled other seeds, like the flood or like something else on my chart. I'm not invested in whether he finds out who the stranger is, and that's why this works. We don't care about some story. We don't care about the plot, the plan. We only care what is the character, who is the character meeting, what's happening around him, and what does the character choose to engage in, and that's why this works. And that's why we had this 3 hours of phenomenal adventure, utterly created, organically, authentically, during play. We play to find out. We play to find out. Guess what? We found out. Now, of course, here is this sellsword mercenary who is now the guardian of a 12-year-old princess of Fledgling Town. Pretty cool. All right. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.